List is everywhere. You can see it when you look at the bubble level, or when you set down your coffee cup. You can feel it when you walk the deck, sit down at the mess, or fall asleep. List is a permanent heel angle, and it can make for a dangerous trip.
Why is ship list even bad? There are three main reasons. Number one, it reduces your reserve stability. Now, as your ship heels over, it's using reserve stability energy to fight the roll action of waves and wind, and then roll back over. Now, it uses that by heeling over. If your ship is already starting at some heel angle, you're reducing the amount of reserve stability that it has, that it depends on. So that's compromising your vessel safety slightly. Well, you might think then, fine, I'll just counterballast to bring myself back to level heel. That's normally what people do. But in doing that, you're also reducing your structural capacity. You're now putting extra weight in your ship, that's putting extra torsion on your hull, extra bending, and so that's once again pushing against your structural limits and reducing your cargo carrying capability. But the number one reason that I don't like ship list is that it discredits the trim and stability booklet. And that's a very big deal. Hey, can you do me a favor? I want you to look around at your bridge, and you'll notice that you have devices there to monitor just about everything on your bridge. The wind angle, the current local weather. You can get just about any detail you want about the ship's engine and electrical output. Now, as you're looking around at all these doodads and gizmos on your ship's bridge, I want you to do me a favor and point out the gauge for stability and the gauge for structure. That's a trick question. There are no gauges to measure stability limits and structural limits. There's no way to directly measure these two items to see how close are you to your limits. Even the fanciest equipment out there can only indirectly measure it based on other things and estimate where you are compared to your limits. And you would think that would be a very important thing. These are two important questions. Stability. How close am I to capsizing? Structure. Will my hull break in half? Those sound like very important questions, but you don't have any direct way to answer those questions. There's no easy way to directly measure these two items. So instead, we have to use the trim and stability booklet, rather than trying to measure your stability and structure limits in real life. The trim and stability booklet goes the other way. It looks at all of the limits of your ship in theory. There's a naval architect that runs through a whole bunch of calculations at an office, and we are checking those stability and structural limits over a whole range of possible operating conditions. And what we do is we check all the possible combinations. We turn it into a set of operating instructions to say, follow these limits and your stability and structure will always be safe. So the trim and stability booklet works out all of these limits in the theoretical world, but we don't want to just rely on theory. So it also includes several loading conditions. These are meant as a reliability check. Standard loading conditions like the full load and the ballast load, these are conditions you're going to be using quite a bit. And the trim and stability booklet tells you that yes, these conditions are safe, but it also gives you details about the heel, the draft, and the trim in those loading conditions, so that you can compare those conditions to your real life ship, and it gives you a reliability check. If your ship matches pretty close to the trim and stability booklet, hey, you know it's still accurate and your stability and structure limits are still safe. Yay! However, if you have a ship list, you're no longer matching that. And now you don't know if your structure and stability limits are still correct. So how do we correct ship list? Because we don't want to leave it lying around. Well, there are three main causes of ship list. The first possible cause is an angle of lull. Now, for safety reasons, you should investigate and assume this possibility first. An angle of lull goes beyond just a permanent heel angle. Angle of lull is actually compromised ship stability, and it's a very big problem. So I'm going to give that one a whole separate video that I will talk about later. Now, assuming that you've eliminated angle of lull, the second reason is the most likely, is added weight. Something has happened to produce an increase of weight on your ship somewhere. Tanks are the main culprit for acute weight growth. They're sitting in the bottom of your ship, and you can't just easily pop your head in and look at them, so it's very easy for them to slowly add weight through, say, possible leaking pipes, leaking valves, or other possible sources. Now, if you've eliminated some sort of acute weight growth, there's one tiny possibility left, and that is general weight growth, the hundreds of little changes that you make to your ship throughout its operating lifetime. Eventually, those might add up to create an actual permanent list. This is extremely unlikely. If it does, your only real recourse is to call a naval architect and install some fixed ballast and get a new trim and stability booklet. Let's talk more about that case that was the most likely one. You're going to need to look for added weight in your tanks. You need to open and check every single tank. And this includes the unused tanks, the tanks with pipes running through them. Check to see if any of those pipes are leaking. Any voids that shouldn't have anything in them at all. Any bilges under the engine room, your chain lockers, any single space that water could accumulate. And you can't just check your sounding tubes. You have to visually inspect every single tank. Now, of course, that means draining out the tank. If you're going to be in them personally, you need to gas free them first. Some survey crews are now actually starting to use remote operated drones to go into tanks without needing to gas free them. So there are all sorts of options, but the main emphasis is visually check every single tank. And if you do that, 9 times out of 10, you are going to find some added liquid somewhere, and you have identified the source of your ship list. Ship list creeps up on you like a disease. If you catch it and treat it early, ship list quickly fades as a minor problem. But if ignored, it continues to grow and place your ship at risk. So be proactive and stop the list once you first suspect it. Your crew will sleep better. Thanks very much. I am Nick, the Naval Architect. Yes, we have reached the part of the show where I ask for tips. So please hand me your tips. In this case, I just need you to click that little subscribe button. Subscribe.